Legal battle over President Trump's travel ban. A federal judge striking a blow to the president's executive order, putting a temporary halt to the immigration ban nationwide.
Yeah, the ruling coming from Washington State, where the attorney general there says no one is above the law, not even the president. The federal government was sent scrambling late last night to reinstate visas. Authorities also told airlines, go ahead, board travelers who were previously caught in this ban. But the Trump administration's vow to appeal could set up a second straight weekend of real uncertainty at airports across the nation.
We have a team of reporters and legal experts standing by to break down what this ruling means and what comes next. Let's start in Washington with CNN's Ryan Nobles. He's there with reaction, and the reaction from the White House was swift, Ryan.
Yeah, no doubt about that, Victor. And you can be sure that this just begins what is going to be a lengthy and possibly bitter legal battle over the future of this executive order from the Trump administration. And it is something, as you said, Victor, that the White House has vowed to fight right up until the very end. But make no mistake, this ruling has a direct and immediate impact, effectively halting Trump's executive order that prevented travel from those 7 Muslim majority countries, and the Customs and Border Patrol telling airports around the country that it's back to business as usual as they begin the process of reissuing these visas. Now, this all stems from this emergency temporary restraining order that was put in place nationwide by a judge in Washington state, which effectively ended this Trump executive order, at least for the time being. Now, this could lead to another round of confusion at airports all around the country as airlines and customs officials attempt to try and figure out exactly how to implement this judge's ruling. Now, the attorney general in Washington State who argued this case, Ben Ferguson, said that it's not his fault that this could lead to another round of confusion, but instead it is the fault of the White House. Take a listen.
The question went to, hey, because this happened at 4 o'clock, would there be some confusion? I'll tell you where there's been confusion. The president's executive order. That's what caused confusion. I'm sorry, there's no other way to put it. It's Keystone Cops. It really is. That's not just me speaking. That's Republican members of Congress, right? That's what's caused the confusion. And so, no, I don't worry about the confusion. There's nothing confusing about the judge order. And the federal government will be expected to abide by it, and they will.
Meanwhile, the White House not backing down in any way, shape, or form. Take a look at this statement from White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer from late last night. At the earliest possible time, the Department of Justice intends to file an emergency stay of this order and defend the executive order of the president, which we believe is lawful and appropriate. The president's role is intended to protect the homeland, and he has the constitutional authority and responsibility to protect the American people. Interestingly enough, when this statement first came out, it included the word outrageous to describe the judge's order. A second statement was later put out, and that word was removed. So at this point, Victor and Christy, we're still waiting on the Department of Justice's official response to this decision in Washington. That could come at any time this morning. Victor?
All right, Ryan Nobles for us in Washington. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to take you now to CNN's Rachel Crane, who's at JFK Airport. Last weekend we were sitting here, Rachel, and there was all kinds of confusion at airports. What's it like there this morning?
Well, Christy, there is still an incredible amount of uncertainty here at JFK, how this new ruling will impact travelers. Now, CBP officials held a conference call last night at around 9 p.m. with all of the major airlines saying that business would go back to usual prior to the travel ban. This is according to an airline executive. Now, following that call, American Airlines taking down their travel alert on their website. Also, Qatar Airlines putting out a statement saying, as directed by U.S. Customs and Border Protection, nationals of the 7 affected countries listed below and all refugees seeking admission presenting a valid, unexpired U.S. or lawful permanent resident card will be permitted to travel to the U.S. and will be processed accordingly upon arrival. Now, Christy, advocacy groups, though, are proceeding with caution. Some groups are encouraging people to take advantage of this moment with all this uncertainty. However, other advocacy groups not wanting to get people's hopes up and are just waiting to see how this all plays out. Now, the State Department is working with the Department of Homeland Security, working to determine the effect of the stay. But as you pointed out, last weekend we saw a huge grassroots protest here at JFK, demanding the release of the detainees that were held just following this executive order. And you know, Christy and Victor, we will see how the day unfolds here at JFK with all of this confusion and uncertainty.
All righty, Rachel Crane, thank you so much.
All right, so let's bring in a CNN legal analyst and criminal defense attorney, Danny Savalos, joining us on the phone. And here with us in studio, immigration attorney Jessica Stern. Good morning to both of you. And Jessica, I want to start with you. Now that this judge, Judge Robart, has placed this temporary restraining order on this executive order, would you advise people in these 7 countries now to get on to planes now that they had these visas that were valid, they're being validated again, to come here to the U.S., or is the legal situation too volatile and you suggest they wait?
I absolutely would advise that they get on the plane and come into the U.S., Victor, because the court has said that there is a likelihood of success on this lawsuit that has been filed by the state of Washington and by Minnesota. And so the likelihood of this reverting back to the ban being in place anytime soon seems to be low. Yes, the White House will be appealing the decision, but ultimately the fact that this temporary restraining order was issued in the first place is a strong indication of where this is going to go and where it's headed.
Okay, Danny, let me come to you. This restraining order applies nationwide. Now, there have been other findings over the past week in relation to the president's executive order that were limited in scope to the district in which the judge presides. But Judge Robart explained this to the rest of the country. Explain why.
It's a fascinating issue. The judge actually, in a probably the only real legal citation that had any teeth, cited to a very similar case arising out of Texas that involved the prior administration. But the important part of it is that case stands for the proposition, at least to this judge, out of the Fifth Circuit, and this would be a case out of Washington that we're talking about today, that immigration law should be enforced vigorously and evenly throughout the entire country. And based on that, the judge struck down this policy, not just in his jurisdiction, the district in which he sits in Washington, but nationwide. And what's fascinating is that, in theory, the president could choose which court he decides he wants to follow. He could choose to follow the one court that sort of validates his policy, or he can choose to follow the court in Washington. And if he decides to claim that the court in Washington, he doesn't have to follow that court, then we have a bit of a constitutional crisis on our hands.
So this calls for immediate relief here, Jessica. Let me come back to you. For the people who want to come into the U.S., who were attempting to come in last week right after this was enacted, how quickly can these visas be reinstated? We know that tens of thousands were revoked during the week since the executive order. How quickly can these visas be reinstated?
There's been conflicting numbers, too, as well. So we heard maybe 40,000 or somewhere between that and 100,000. So it's the government. They are going to need to act swiftly in order to process these tens of thousands of visas. But we do know that in some of the orders that took place earlier this last week, that there was some delay in the Border Protection agencies complying with the orders. And so it seems as if they are addressing it and they are recognizing it, and hopefully it will be followed, but it will take some time for the visas to be reissued. However, the airlines are now supposed to be letting these folks on board with the visas.
Danny, there have been probably a half dozen defeats for the president's executive order. There was one just before this ruling came down from the judge there in Washington State. There was one victory there in Boston. But I wonder, as we await the response from the government, what do you expect will be the legal foundation, their argument as they appeal this restraining order?
Well, we saw from their briefs, and we even saw from Sean Spicer's statement out of the White House, that they believe the Immigration and Nationality Act gives the current administration the power to bar entry to those people that it deems dangerous. Now, of course, the state of Washington's position on that was that that particular section of the law is older than newer federal laws that say, no, not quite. In fact, you can't use these laws to discriminate against people. And then, of course, the state of Washington's position is that no matter what the federal laws say, it is unconstitutional. It's a violation of the Establishment Clause, the Equal Protection Clause, to discriminate against people based on race, national origin, religion, etc. So that the White House's position will be clear from both its statement and its briefs, with a basis under which it will appeal. And frankly, I mean, given the state of the different circuits and the circuit splits, a reasonable judge on the Ninth Circuit might agree with the current administration. It's really reasonable minds may differ on this issue, as we can see, because they do.
Jessica, finally to you. For people who are attempting to come into the country, who found themselves in the situation last week where they were okay to come in potentially when they got on the plane on Friday morning afternoon Eastern time, but by the time they got here they were under this ban. What protections would they have potentially if that were to happen again if they try to get in, considering this restraining order?
Well, the change happened in mid-flight for so many of these people, and ultimately, if the airline lets them on the plane, they should be admitted into the United States. But it's hard to sue the government. Sovereign immunity is usually the main reason why people can't bring claims like this against the government. But, you know, we're seeing that people are not able to get to their jobs. Companies in Washington like Amazon and Expedia, they are missing out on their employees. Students of colleges are not getting to school on time. And so it could lead to issues that have further implications. But the advice is to not leave the country if you're currently here, just because we don't know how sensitive it could be or how quickly it could change. But if you are able to get on the plane and come into the United States, our advice is that you should. All
right, Jessica Stern, Danny Savalos, thanks so much. We'll continue this conversation throughout the morning.
Thank you.
Well, the disappointment and the disgust over President Trump's travel ban that we've seen across the nation this week is being echoed this morning across the globe. Several protests overnight and expected to continue throughout the day. None more eye-catching, though, than the protests on the cover of this magazine.